Dave, I have the top of the hour and we can begin recording.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Dr. Dave Richardson. I'm your instructor for today's webinar, which is entitled What's New with MedDRA version 28.1 and the MSSO. I am a medical officer with the MSSO and specifically a adult neurologist by training. I've been with the MSSO about 12 years, and I will be conducting the webinar, which we give twice a year. This particular webinar is scheduled for 1 hour, but in my experience and based upon the number of slides that we have, we probably only need about 30 or 35 minutes to cover this. And then we will also have a question and answer session where you can submit questions via the chat box, which I will attempt to answer at the end of the presentation. And if necessary, I will send your questions to the help desk if it's something that is out of my realm of knowledge or expertise. Assisting me today is Sarah Clark, who's one of our training coordinators as well with the MSSO. And without further ado, let's get moving with what's new with MedDRA version 28.1 and the MSSO. So, this slide is to remind me to tell you that MedDRA is owned by ICH. And because it is a living and breathing terminology that requires maintenance, ICH created an organization called the MedDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization, or MSSO. The activities of the MSSO are overseen by an ICH MedDRA steering committee, and the composition of that committee is summarized here. The MSSO is principally responsible for the upkeep and updating of MedDRA, including training, adding new terminology, as well as adjusting the hierarchy so that it works optimally for you as our MedDRA users. This slide is to remind me to tell you a few things. First of all, this is copyrighted material, and the copyright is owned by ICH. With the exception of the MedDRA and ICH logos, however, you can feel free to use this material in public presentations as long as you acknowledge that ICH owns the copyright. However, if you modify this presentation in any way, shape, or form, you should acknowledge that you've changed the presentation, and you should not imply or infer that ICH either supports or endorses the changes that you've made. The second bullet is legal language, so I will read it verbatim. The presentation is provided as is without warranty of any kind. In no event shall the ICH or the authors of the original presentation be liable for any claim, damages, or other liability arising from the use of the presentation. And we have no third-party slides in today's presentation, so I will skip over that last bullet. So what are our topics today? Well, we're going to start out by talking about what's new with version 28.1, including a summary of changes, including changes that are in the standardized MedDRA queries, or SMQs as we call them. Then we're going to highlight a few important additions to version 28.1. We'll talk about proactive maintenance, the status of MedDRA translations. We will talk about updates to the points to consider documents. We will update our mapping initiatives, talk about some new IT tools available, as well as upcoming events related to MedDRA and the MSSO. And then we will conclude with a question and answer session. So let's dig right in now. What's new with MedDRA version 28.1? Well, as you know, MedDRA is released twice a year on March 1st and September 1st in English. The September release is always what is called a simple release. So this release of 28.1, which will happen on September 1st, 2025, is a simple release, meaning that the changes that occur will only be at the PT and LLT level. Therefore, there will be no changes of SOCs, HLGTs, or HLTs. For this particular release, the MSSO considered 1,412 change requests, including SMQ requests. However, this number does not include translation updates. Of those 1,412 change requests, 1,032 were approved, 367 were not approved. And if your change request was not approved, you received a communication from us as to why it was not approved. And 13 were suspended, meaning we either needed more information from the requester or more time to consider the request. Now, as always, we add hundreds and sometimes over 1,000 new terms to each new release. So that leads to an increasingly enlarging terminology. And one of the things we always do is to compare the upcoming version with what's currently available. So let's look at the comparison of 28.0 to 28.1. And you will see that the net change of terms per SOC, as always, shows a significant number of terms being added across all 27 of the SOCs. As is usually the case, the most activity is in investigations and surgical and medical procedures. And that reflects the fact that laboratory medicine as well as medical technology are expanding rapidly. And it's important for us to stay on top of new laboratories, new investigations, new analyses, as well as new techniques and procedures, and make sure that they are included in MedDRA. In terms of our SMQs or standardized MedDRA queries, there were no new SMQs added in version 28.1. And therefore, that means that there are still 110 SMQ topics. Now, also remember that 25 of our SMQs are hierarchical, meaning they are organized in a hierarchy with some subordinate SMQs underneath the level 1 SMQ. And when we take into account the subordinate SMQs, that brings the total number of individual SMQs up to 230. Also remember that MedDRA is maintained by the MSSO, and because SMQs are part of MedDRA, the MSSO also maintains SMQs on an ongoing basis. So there were 225 PT changes to SMQs in version 28.1. Now, if you think that you have an idea for a new SMQ, you can submit via our tool WebCR a request for a new SMQ. There will be some questions and information that you will provide to help us in evaluating your request, but that's how you can help by being the person who spearheads perhaps a new SMQ that goes into development. And as always is the case, we offer an introductory guide for SMQs, which is continually updated, where you will find all of the most detailed information possible on all things related to SMQs. So let's talk about some highlights of version 28.1. And 2 or 3 releases back, we decided to implement this particular section where we go to the international medical officers, which is the group of my physician colleagues who every week meet a couple times a week to consider new change requests as well as making changes to the terminology. And what we ask them to do is every time there is a new release to highlight 1 or 2 additions that they think are particularly important for our users to know about. So the first thing that they wanted to highlight for this release is that we added several new investigation terms related to CAR T cells. And specifically, CAR T cells are therapies that use genetically modified T cells to target tumor cells. This is cutting edge technology. This is the basis on which a lot of these successful treatments that either cure or sometimes alter the prognosis or course of cancers, they are based on this CAR T cell model. So we've added some new investigation terms that describe specific testing in either research or monitoring. And these tests help to check if CAR T cells are expanding as expected. It allows you to make statements or to select codes that refer to the number and location of modified cells. There are terms related to the genetic modification and its safety, as well as to detect risks like uncontrolled cell proliferation. All of these concepts are captured in new investigation terms that we have been adding to MedDRA. This slide is just designed to give you a flavor for some of these kinds of CAR T cell investigation terms. These are complicated medical concepts, and I don't intend as a non-oncologist to go through them in any real detail, except to let you know that these are cutting edge concepts, and that is what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that MedDRA reflects the most current, up-to-date, cutting edge concepts that you need to do your job in the development and maintenance of your products. So this is one that the IMOs wanted me to highlight. The second one is ophthalmologic terms. And for this particular release, version 28.1, greater than 5% of the new terms added are related to ophthalmology. And this spans a wide range of eye conditions, diagnostic techniques, and surgical procedures, including conditions of the eye, the posterior globe, disorders of the optic nerve and retina, procedural terms, as well as diagnostic tool and imaging techniques. And here's just a sampling of the kinds of terms at both the PT and LLT levels related to ophthalmology that were added to MedDRA in this latest release. So those two topics, CAR T cell investigation terms and ophthalmology terms, were the two that the IMOs wanted me to highlight for you in version 28.1. And we appreciate their input on that. Let's talk now about proactive maintenance. This is a process that allows you as users to highlight inconsistencies in MedDRA or perhaps suggest corrections or improvements. Some of the kinds of things you pointed out to us in the past led to reviews of the placement of abrasion terms in MedDRA, dental restoration terms, as well as adding chemical burn grade terms to MedDRA. Now, for this particular release, there were no proactivity proposals implemented, but we don't want to discourage you from submitting such requests if you think they're appropriate. And you do so by sending your proposal to the help desk at mssohelp@meddra.org. And the more detailed information that you provide in your proposal, the greater the likelihood of it being implemented. So again, if you see a need, please take the effort to submit these to us for our careful deliberation and consideration. Let's talk a little bit about MedDRA translations. As you know, for the last couple of years, we have been continuing to expand the number of languages that MedDRA is available in. So here is a table that I'm presenting to you, which shows 27 languages that MedDRA is available in. Now, there is a caveat here, which is 3 of the languages, Norwegian, Slovak, and Slovenian, are languages that we expect to be completed, the translations to be completed by the time of the non-English releases on September 15th, 2025. So for all intents and purposes, we're considering them available and listing them as one of the 27 languages. But I also then want to show you these 6 languages which are still under development and point out that Uzbek was recently added as a language that is going to be developed as a translation. So we want to point out that the number of languages is constantly increasing, and that when one brings forward a proposal for a language that you would like to see MedDRA translated into, it is evaluated to decide whether that development will actually take place. So we're constantly trying to increase the ability of users to use MedDRA by offering it in more and more languages. Now, one other thing about language translations, and this is related to the French translation. The MSSO identified a French terminology reference, terminologia anatomica, or TA as it's called, which has been endorsed by the official reference for the French medical dictionary. We consulted with the French-speaking regulatory authority, and they agreed that TA was an appropriate reference, and therefore we undertook the task of updating the existing French translation using this reference. As a result, 1,400 MedDRA terms will be renamed using TA. I have 2 examples here, which is the term for atrial fibrillation and fracture of the patella. And these 1,400 term renamings will be implemented in version 28.1, coming out in English on September 1st, 2025. Let's move on to the points to consider document, a suite of documents that are ICH endorsed and are designed to help you use MedDRA in the most effective and efficient way. You may recall that in September 2024, we added a new section, Section 5, to the Points to Consider companion document. And this Section 5 revolves around manufacturing and quality system issues. Now, this is really on the manufacturing side. And because the MSSO did not have any in-house expertise, we conferred with a panel of experts to help us with the development of this particular section of the companion document. And as a result, one of these experts has kindly agreed to create a video for us, which they did. It is a video that talks one through this section, the information in it, and how it might be used in your day-to-day work if you work on the manufacturing or quality system side. So this recording, which also has a recorded question and answer session, provides guidance on coding product-specific manufacturing deviations and nonconformances, as well as having some practical coding examples related to manufacturing and quality system issues. And if you go on the MedDRA training page under instructional videos, you will find here at the bottom, this is where you go to take a look at this video. So if you are working on the manufacturing side and want some help with understanding this section of the companion document, this is where I would take you for you to hear one of our experts explain that particular new addition to the points to consider documents. Okay, let's move on and talk about MedDRA mapping initiatives. As you know, we have ongoing initiatives mapping MedDRA with other existing terminologies. One of them is SNOMED CT. So the last release of the MedDRA CT, the SNOMED CT to MedDRA mapping was on the 30th of April 2025. It was based on MedDRA version 27.1, which was released in September 2024, and the January 2025 release of SNOMED CT International version. And most of the changes were the result of changes in SNOMED CT or MedDRA, allowing for new or improved mappings. The next scheduled release, and the releases are updated annually, the next scheduled release is in April of 2026. And just to refresh your memory, this is bi-directional mapping. Okay, now let's talk about ICD-10 to MedDRA mapping. The last release was published on the 24th of June, 2025. It was based on WHO 2019 International Core version of ICD-10, as well as MedDRA version 28.0, released in March of 2025. This mapping is updated twice annually. The next update is scheduled for January of 2026. And the changes in the current release include remapping of 11 ICD terms to a better matching MedDRA LLT, as well as new mappings of 125 ICD terms that were previously designated as either out of scope or unmappable. So in total, we have approximately now 11,000 mapping terms in this ICD-10 to MedDRA mapping. And to find either of these, one goes on the downloads page, and here, as in this red rectangle, are where you find the links to the SNOMED CT MedDRA mapping, as well as the ICD-10 to MedDRA mapping. One other mapping I want to mention is MDRF to MedDRA mapping. MDRF stands for the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum. This is a mapping that is designed to assist with coding and capturing information related to medical devices. And if you have attended this webinar before, you know that we have already had an ongoing relationship where we have been mapping MedDRA to Annex E of MDRF, which is the section for clinical signs and symptoms or conditions. And the latest update was placed on the MDRF website on the 3rd of March 2025. But I also wanted to announce that MDRF and ICH, with the MSSO supporting ICH in this initiative, it has been decided to extend MDRF mappings to also include MDRF Annex A, which is the annex related to medical device problems. So again, we are continuing with MDRF mapping, but we are now expanding to a second annex for those of you who work on the device side, where you may be able to find new mappings that will help you in your day-to-day work. So let's talk a little bit about information technology tool updates. The first thing for me to mention is that in July of 2025, we released an updated version of the MedDRA desktop browser. The reason we did this was to have the MedDRA desktop browser have the same new, clean, user-friendly interface. It's a simpler look. It is designed for optimizing your searching and display of search results. but this new version keeps all of the functions that were in the legacy desktop browser, including the hierarchy analysis tool and the SMQ analysis tool. And the legacy MedDRA desktop browser 4.1 will continue to be available. But we did this so that you have a version of the MedDRA desktop browser which has that same crisp, simplified look. To illustrate that point, here is the legacy MedDRA desktop browser user interface, and this is what the new interface looks like. The features are still there, they're just not all compiled on one page, and you can customize the view so you can have at your fingertips or in eyesight only the features that you're interested in displaying. How do you access this? Well, you go onto the MedDRA.org website onto the tools page. And when you get there, there is a related link here to download the desktop browsers. And when you click there, it's going to give you a list of available browsers. And here's where you'll find the MedDRA Desktop Browser 5.0 with the new, cleaner interface. Login information is required, as is any kind of download from the MedDRA website. One other thing that I want to talk about is the upcoming release of a download application programming interface, or API. Now, I'm not a computer science person, but let me just describe APIs as follows. These are MedDRA tools, functions, or features that we at the MSSO have written the code for, tested, validated, and perform the upkeep on, that you within your organization may want to use on your platforms or in your programs that you develop to use MedDRA within your organizations. So currently over 600 organizations are using or testing with the MedDRA APIs that the MSSO has completed. And in early fourth quarter of this year, we expect to release a new download API. This deployment is going to include not only an ASCII format, but a JSON format. Now, I'm not a computer science person, so if you're going to ask me questions about the nuances of ASCII or JSON format, that's not a question I'm going to be able to help you with. We would refer those kinds of questions, if you are a software designer within an organization, to the help desk, where someone from our IT group can answer your questions and go more into a vertical dive for more information. But these downloaded files will be in all supported languages, including mappings as a separate download. The MSSO will also be assessing these APIs to make sure that they meet the standards of GXP, or good practice. And also, we want to point out that the zip files with ASCII data will continue to be produced in addition to the JSON format. So where do you go to get information on APIs? Well, if you go under the tab How to Use, Tools, and select on APIs in this graphic, it's going to take you to this informational page regarding MedDRA APIs. Or here is a URL for a direct link to that information. So let's conclude now by talking about some upcoming events related to MedDRA and the MSSO. The first is the Latin America User Group meeting, which is an in-person meeting which will occur on the 2nd of September 2025. The location will be Sao Paulo, Brazil. The time is from 9 to 17:30 Brasilia time. It will be conducted by my friend Fernando Pereira, and it will be conducted in Brazilian Portuguese. Now, the registration for this meeting is closed. We had a tremendous amount of interest in this meeting, and the available seats were rapidly taken. However, we are maintaining a waiting list on the MSSO events page, and you can put your name on the waiting list in case there are cancellations and additional seats become available. The second meeting I want to talk about is the Korean MedDRA Drug Joint User Group meeting. Again, an in-person meeting which will occur on the 13th of November 2025. The time is 10 to 16:30 Korean Standard Time. The meeting language will be Korean. It will be conducted by my friend Uni Do, and the registration portal is now available on the MSSO events page of the MedDRA website. The third meeting I want to mention is the Indian User Group meeting. Again, an in-person meeting The date will be the 17th of February 2026. This will be in Hyderabad, India, at a site to be determined. The time will be 9 o'clock to 1700 Indian Standard Time. This meeting will be conducted in English, and more details will be posted to the MedDRA events page on the MedDRA website when available. And the last thing I want to talk about is MedDRA booth exhibits at some upcoming meetings. So we'll talk about 4 of them. The first is the 7th International Society of Pharmacovigilance, or ISOP, Latin America Chapter Symposium. These are the dates, and this will be held in Mexico. Then we have the Connect International Conference, again in September 2025. This will be in Seoul, Republic of Korea. The third is another ISOP meeting, but specifically their 2025 annual meeting, which will be held in late October in Cairo, Egypt. And the last is the Society of Clinical Data Management in December, again in Hyderabad, India. So again, the MSSO is going to have a presence at all of these meetings at booth exhibits. And if you are planning to attend any of these meetings, please feel free to stop by our booth, say hello to us, see if we can be of any help in helping you better understand MedDRA or answer any questions that you have regarding MedDRA. And of course, we always have little handouts for all of our subscribers. We're always grateful for those face-to-face interactions because it's those kind of conversations that let us know how good a job we're doing and where we need to improve. So we'll be looking for you. And if you're at those meetings, please stop by and say hello to my fellow MSSOers who will be manning those booths. So at this point, I'm going to stop and thank you for your time and attention with today's presentation. And now I will ask Sarah if we had any questions that came in while I was doing the presentation.
We do not at this time.
Okay, so let's just give it another 30 seconds in case someone is a slow typer like me. But again, we do this particular webinar in multiple languages. It's going to be presented a total of 8 times in 7 languages over the next 5 weeks. This is how we make sure that we have the ability to get as much information about not only MedDRA, but activities within the MSSO out there for you, our users. And we find this is a way for you to get a brief summary of the things that are happening while allowing you to delve in greater detail if you want to get more detail on any of the things that are covered in this particular webinar. As always, should you have any questions about MedDRA, feel free to send a communication to our help desk and someone will get back to you very rapidly to try to answer your questions and concerns. So Sarah, have we had any other questions come in?
We did not.
Okay, so at this point, then, I want to thank you for your time and attention with today's webinar. I want to thank Sarah for her help. Again, we are here to help you. This is a custodian. We are custodians of MedDRA. You are the owners of MedDRA. And one of the ways that we try to help you as the owners is to let you know what's new and provide mechanisms for you to give us input so we can make the product even better. So at this point, if nothing else has come in at the last minute, then I'm going to sign off. This is Dr. Dave Richardson signing off from today's webinar. Enjoy the remainder of your day.